All right. Hey, everyone. I'm going to make a quick recap of today's trading day. I, well, you've never seen the layout I just showed, but I'll show you the general market under the usual kind of perspective. Um, so 2 hours, 1.5 months, and then daily, 6 months or so. So essentially, going into today, we started the day off with SA Open. One thing was making a big move in the open, and that was the advanced decline line on the Nasdaq. The reason for going into this, we know the market's pretty choppy, and we kind of know that for a bunch of different reasons. But probably most importantly, nothing is down. Like this number had kind of fallen a lot yesterday, and nothing is really going up, and nothing is moving 20%. So if you were to think about the general nature of the moves that are happening, it doesn't make sense to hold any trade for 20% in this environment because nothing is moving 20%, or 17 and 16 stocks are moving 20%. So, with that in mind, it's basically not a swing trading environment at all. And usually my swings are pullbacks and then hold for 2 days, maybe three, or breakouts like flags and then breakouts. But with this information, you don't really have any there's no evidence that the market's making big moves. Um, if we take a look then at the stuff that's kind of been bullish, over a period of time, we're essentially day four into an upward bounce, and you're going to start to expect some kind of single day mean reversion here on average. It's like it's kind of like I don't know, day one, day two, day three, mean reversion 5%, right? It's something like that going on here. Um, day one, or yeah, day one, day two, and then day three mean reverts, and then day one, day two, and day three mean reverts. So you see, that's kind of what I expected going into today. Arguably, this is day one, this is day two, after a red day. Tomorrow we're going to get a fade, is kind of what I would expect in Soxel. And it's also what I expected today. But there's context about today. Well, so first of all, everything has bounced over the last few days. If we look at the bearish sectors, um, it's Ethereum. So we're 3 days into a bounce on Ethereum. That started to fade. 3 days it bounced into silver, began fading today. But really, going into today, there wasn't any flags or it. You could have found meter version setups today. That's kind of what my expectation was. Maybe we'll get some things pulling back intraday, and it ended up being silver, and I didn't trade silver. So going into the open, because the market's so choppy, I've been really focusing on stocks in play. I don't think there's any reason to be a swing trader in this environment at all. The numbers are just so bad. And then when you look at things like the overall, like IWM and things like that, it's so under the hood, uh, you know, it's just super choppy, basically. So when we go into my laptop with situational awareness layout, here's IWM. Literally nothing, right? Here's NASDAQ. Again, it's literally nothing. And every other breadth indicator we have apart, if you just ignore the indices, it's choppy. But then you look at the indices and it remains choppy. So maybe you'd be able to find something if there was a episodic pivot, right? For example, in this period here, when it was clearly choppy for 6 months, you could find moves in things like HYMC, which had an EP, and that was with gold moving a lot. And then you also, after that, could have found moves in things like Fazli, which had an EP. So if you're trying to approach the market, one question would be which stocks have had an EP? And so I'll just show you. They would show up here. If I sort things by discount true, these are the names with the most explosive volume on the 2 hour chart possible. Generally, what you'll find is the EPs on the 2 hour. I highlight the candles red. There will literally be three or four of them in a few day period. So HYMC has two on day one. That's like a patent characteristic of an EP. And then we have another, and then on this day, HYMC in my book is like super tradable because it has one, two, three, four big red candles. If we look at Fazli, for example, on its EP, it actually had four on day one. So for me, I'm just looking for things with greater than four of my red candles for the most part. You know, you can start at three just to be like certain, but I want you to look at the daily chart. There should also be a big EP like candle on the daily chart, kind of in the past 6 months or WDC is a high price stock, has a lot of sales, so it's a bit different in dynamics. But I'm trying to talk about like special charts, right? Wendy's wouldn't really count, you know. Something like AMPX would be perfect on this day here in March, right? Or this day here. If these days were big, these would be very viable candidates. Plug, obviously, classic name. ASTS is a classic, But if you as I switch through them, they're all below their moving averages, right? So another trait of EPs is that the 20 is greater than the 50, and the 50 is greater than the 100. And so I kind of simplify it. I just look at things trending up, and then I look for three. And WDC, there's no EP day, but these are high price names. Dell had a big move today. NWL, NWL is pretty valid, I would say. But it's I don't know. It could work. The thing is, the other characteristic that you'll see with EPs is like usually the volume doesn't really dry up below the 50. Like if it's had 3 days below the 50 moving average, and it's like the type of stock to go parabolic with no sales and like below 500 million in sales and kind of low market cap. Once it's had 3 days below its 50, it's usually done unless new news hits the stock. And in the case of HYMC, this has sector context because HYMC is a gold company. It's a gold mining company. And look at silver, right? So if you're looking at something like Fazli, when does Fazli die, right? Fazli dies after 2 to 3 days below the 50-day in terms of volume. So 1, 2, 3, volume comes back in. But, it's kind of like, I think once it's had, by this point, it's getting extended. So I'm just trying to explain the dynamics. These rules aren't perfect. If you really wanted to be careful, you can just say a day below the 200, it's dead. But, yeah, I would say probably a day below the 200. If we look at something like FCell, you'll see the same characteristic with the volume. Like once the volume falls below 200 for the first time, it's completely dead. And it's the same thing here. FCell has been above the 200 the whole time, and it's generally provided quite good trading opportunities along the way. And it's essentially the only one. But I digress. Here's things like SNDK. And these are when I say below the 200, I'm specifically talking about things with like below half a billion in sales. Those are like the most speculative names. If it's like a $300 stock and it has a few days below the 200 in terms of volume, that's not the death of it. It's not positive, but you can see like SNDK basically had this whole week here below the 200, and it was just setting up, and then volume came in and it went higher. But that's because it's a lot more legitimate of a stock. The moves are going to last longer. So when we look at everything, BlackBerry is completely dead at this point, and I'll just quickly flip through them. Something like Twilio, it's the 20 is about to fall below the 50. It hasn't really had an EP. Like it had a big gap, but part of a characteristic of an EP is like the highest volume in the past, say, year, right? And so Twilio has had much higher volume recently, specifically this day here. So, it just doesn't meet that criteria. AMD high price, it's pretty valid as a stock to trade. But, I think it's valid. It's just missing. We're looking specifically for like very special market leaders to trade right now. So the ones that you would find are going to be up here with 3, WDC, it's not even close to its 200 in terms of the volume. So you're just trying to find a bunch of different things that suggest the stock is good to trade. The 20-day moving average is about to fall below the 50. Dell completely wrecked in terms of volume. It's not special. This thing, absolutely not, right? In terms of volume. CRDO, absolutely not because of the volume. And then SLS. So SLS is like a biotech with presumably not much sales, zero sales. So there's no way that this thing is ever going to be like something I would actually trade with the volume as it is. And then with MXL, you know, as far as I'm concerned, it it died on this day here. You know, that's when it's probably not going to have a bunch of tradable moves anymore. So it's pretty much dead. And then FCell, it could work. It could be in play. But really, all it is as far as like really like explosive leaders, we just have FCell right now. And then I should add that to my watch list because I missed it. Okay. And then, everything else is essentially like a high priced, low ADR ish type name that you'll see like these are the stuff I'm watching. So I'm watching Dell. Why am I watching Dell? Well, it's not perfect, but it is close. Okay. So it had the EP day, it has the 60-day or the 50-day moving average. Like the volume is uptrending over quite some period of time. And you can see it's like the type of stock you'd want to trade. Um, the thing is, if the market is choppy, AMD is a $1 trillion company. So the volume definitely doesn't matter. It's a $500 stock. It's tradable, but the what you'll find is like a characteristic of like very strong market momentum is like, for example, when SNDK was leading, look at the volume pattern compared to the 200-day. Like just complete expansion of volume. Those are the ones that are like really, really special that you really want to be watching. And if I just flip through them, the only volume moving average that looks like SNDK is AMAT for sure. It's very valid. Uh, there's so much technical analysis. I don't want to teach it all in one video. The point being is that a lot of these are kind of appearing as pretty mid to bad, right? Like this is very nice chart, but the volume is not there. So I'll remove it real quick. BlackBerry is dying today. It took out the 200-day, and then these things are high price for the most part, like crazy large capitalization. These are the liquid lava types of names that people like, can trade regularly. I wouldn't describe these as like market leaders. Like if you look at something like, I'm gonna date myself real quick. Okay, so this is CGC. You have to put it on the 2-day chart, but I just want you to look at the nature of the volume when this thing makes its big move. So it's just very clearly expanding along the way when it's thematic, right? If you look at like this breakout here, it's the same thing. Like this is a 2-day chart, but obviously it's expanding. Same thing here, like very obviously expanding. So we're just looking, you see like all of these swings, news comes out and stuff like that, and that's why they're tradable on specific days. But as an example, here's another one. Like if we look at MSTR when it was really hot in COVID, this is what the chart looks like, right? If we look at QBTS when it was hot recently, look at the way the chart is, right? It's just incredible. So we have these traits that are just not present in the names I'm watching, and it ends up being stuff like Dell, which I would compare to Apple, maybe like at literally here, for example. It's gonna move, but they're just not insanely high expected value. So I don't think there are any market leaders right now in the in a way I would typically describe as market leaders. And so that's really my analysis. Like I know Dell is breaking out, but it's one stock of It's there's one good setup today. You know what I mean? Everything else kind of doesn't look doesn't look right. We don't have a lot of, like, part of the reason you need to pay attention to this, in my opinion, is because if the environment is good, you'll have a lot of them, right? So like IONQ here, see how it meets all the criteria? Look at the volume. Look how long it takes to close below the 200 in terms of volume. Um, so this is like a characteristic of a very hot market, is that a lot of stocks with no sales will be making these sorts of moves. QBTS, RGTI, QNCO, you know what I mean? Maybe SMCI a bit earlier, right? So we have SMCI here. And so we just don't have that right now. And there's no like, there's just none. There's literally none of it. Um, so yeah, today, I want to explain that because it's not just this, it's the type of names we're watching. These are like scraping the barrel, slow movers with high quality. These are all like big companies with a lot of sales, lower ADR that are moving. It's not like D-Dog. It makes it into my watch list. Like, yeah, it had the EP day. It has a lot of sales. Um, but like at this point, look at the nature of the volume. Look at the size of the sales. This is a massive company. So these things are going to move, but they're going to move a bit like MDB did back in the day. Maybe on the 2-day chart, you'll see it. It's like stuff in here after its IPO, where you get short moves. They're not crazy. They're just measured moves because it's like a large high price stock. So I wanted to, that's the general environment. Um, Nothing is amazing right now. That's on the long side. On the bearish side, this is kind of what we have. So you see, like, again, these are like established companies that are in commodities or whatever. Some of them are not tradable, but these are just names that are trending down at the moment. Um, you know, I think if I were to tell you like which names I thought were the best, it's TTD short. It's kind of 5 days into its short move. Coin I think could be, like, if you look at CONI today, I think it could bounce, but we don't really have the breadth to support it, and it's just not that type of environment. The only bearish leader at the moment is MSTR, which, or BTCZ. That these things look ready to go tomorrow. I don't really have any sort of situational awareness that like the whole market is bearish right now. So that's just what I'm seeing. Maybe other people are seeing more opportunity, but I mean, like, it could change. Things could change tomorrow, but when things are choppy, they always look like they could change tomorrow. Every single day in here, like, I thought IWM could break down here, so I took shorts. But on every single day here, it did look like it could break down, and it just, same thing here. If you were trading here, that looks like it would break down. It failed. That looks like it wants to go up. The news comes out. Looks like it's reclaiming, and then it fails. So we really are just, that's the environment we're in. And these environments can last for a very long period of time. Recall 2021. So the general situation that I'm in is that moves last about a day, and in general, there's no expected value in the afternoon. The majority of the expected value, this is most of the time true anyways, but like, I think it's very valid to hold things for 20 minutes here. Like, if you take a daily breakout, I think you can sell it at 10 o'clock Eastern time within half an hour. And I think that's totally valid. There's no point waiting for things to reverse intraday. On the short side, it really depends on like how many days up the market is. Like with us here, there's no sense holding a short overnight. It's the same thing. Like some things, for example, today had clean short moves, but that's TTD. That's like one name. If we kind of look at everything, I would say most names, there were two names that had clean short moves. The majority of the shorting, so look, long until 8 and then short right here. Those were the two trades that had a lot of EV over the general market. So I'm going to talk about what I did. Given the situational awareness, we're going to talk about the news that happened today and then we'll call a video. Did a lot of detail on 5-minute work today because that's what I've been working on. So I made this whole thing. Took a lot of time. It was probably stupid to extend it out 42 5-minute bars. Um, Essentially, what I did is I took DTEZ and I ran two scans. So we have C by like V CC1, this Stockby scan. So up $3 on 300,000 shares, or above, some price floor is liquid. And this is intended to be basically run, in my opinion, in the pre-market or first 5 minutes. This will give you a list of stocks. And I put that list of stocks down here. And so that found all of them. And then I have one as well. These are like more liquid leaders that are high priced. These are like liquid lava things that are like not insanely illiquid, basically. I'm gonna add this to Stockbeast thing because there's no point watching stuff that isn't moving at all. Okay, so it gave us a list, and we found that things like SMCI today were essentially moving the most on the most headlines. So if you look at, I have this open here for a reason. So if you go before the pre-market, this is one of the stocks with the biggest gap with the most headlines. So SMCI has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 headlines in the news feed. It's the most of any stock in this, in like what was moving in the early market session. So I guess Rocket Lab had a few. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, this is SMCI. Okay, but you see, did Rocket Lab have any? It had a few, it had like one. So most names didn't have news this morning. The big news that came out was SMCI, and it showed up in this scan and this scan. And basically, I just take the top 10 sorted by volume buzz, and that goes into a watch list, and it fills up throughout the day. Now, that gave me a list of 20 stocks to watch through. And my situational awareness was to trade the fade today. So for me, what I was doing was I was watching these names here, looking for fades. And essentially the first opportunity where like the majority of the watch list went red was at 10:15 a.m. Eastern time. So I shorted, I took NBIZ to the long side right here. That I managed it so well. It literally, my stop was 20.39. So I just decided to put it a bit below the low of the day, and I got out right at the close. So my entry was here, I think something like this, and then I got out there, and it was really good. And then I also thought AMD looked good for a fade right here. So I did, and I put my stop right up here. And instead of taking AMD, I decided to do Soxol. So I did SOXS. That thing ended up failing, and you can see exactly where my stop was, and that lost 2%. So overall, it was a green day. Went from roughly here, including some slippage, and I made 1 R on this trade, just barely, luckily, and that made my day green. And so I was really happy about that. So that was basically it. What I wanted to talk about was the lesson from today. So because the market, you can see this layout I built. I know it's toxic to look at, but I can just do this for you. So what I noticed going into the market was, if you look here, this is SMCI. This is one of the most in-play stocks of the day. The open range break worked on it, and you can't see it here, but I have it written down on a spreadsheet. The opening 5 minutes today had 16 out of 20 names on this list green on the 5 minute chart. So this is not representative of the opening candle. I haven't gone back 78 candles, but at this point in time, if you flipped through the list, 16 out of the 20 that are in this watch list were green. Now there's some overlap. Like for example, we have SMCI, NBIS, and I think there's some overlap in the list, but 16 is like above 75%, and I would kind of say at minimum you want 15 to 16 to suggest a breadth signal. And the thing that was up the most in the first 5 minutes of the day was ARWR. I'll show you on a non-AIDS chart because I now that you know what I was looking at, you can picture what went on. So we have ARWR here. This was up the most in the first 5 minutes. We had SMCI, obviously, and we had OCLU. And so these are the four that were up a lot. Now, if you had to pick between one of these, well, we can pull up the news, and I can tell you OCLU had no headlines. SMCI had 8. ARWR had, I think, 0 as well. And so I think that the best trade, like very clearly, was SMCI. And I think you could have entered it here with a stop at low of day, and that would have done 5% in the opening half hour or 1 R. The next period, so at candle 2, we had 17 stocks green at this period in time. And the ones that were most green at the time were like SMCI, RPM, this thing here, and MU. Now, this is like a secondary signal. I think if you don't want to trade the 5 minute open range because it's green, fair enough. These are the signals that were like most volatile on huge breadth at minute 2 in the market. And from this point in time, if you held for 20 minutes or so, that's 1% on MU. RPM didn't work, but like that's not an open range break. It doesn't make any sense at this point to take, in my opinion. And then we had SMCI, and I think if you were to ask me, I think this is the better trade because it's 2.5% risk and 3.85% over the following 20-25 minutes. Those were the initial open range breaks. And I think because the market was hit with such hard news, with SMCI having 8 headlines driving the move, I think the open range break was really reasonable to take in spite of the fact that the situational awareness was chop. So if you think about like how the day progressed, it's a choppy environment. So only hold trades for 20 minutes. Given the choppy environment, trade the thing with the most news, trade the open range break with some kind of breadth thrust as we saw either here or here, and then just kind of, get out. What ultimately happened throughout the course of the day, and I think this is the coolest part, is at this point in time, CBRS, we had 17 stocks green in the watch list out of 20. And you can see the whole market was straight up. So CBRS was straight up, Soxel was straight up, NASDAQ was straight up, IWM was choppy, and our situational awareness was choppy. That didn't change. Like if the SMCI news was like really, really incredible, everything would have gapped up above the prior day's high or close at the very least, right? That didn't happen. So my plan was to fade things, and I didn't even take the orb on SMCI. I think you could have today. I didn't do it. I wasn't ready at all. But ultimately, the best trade of the day, and this is what I went towards, was fading things at not here, because this is where 17 things were up, but I can show you what was up most on the 5 minute chart at this exact candle. So CBRS right here was one of the leading names up the most in the past 5 minutes at 10 o'clock. Then we had NBIS right here. We also had SMCI, of course, and then we had MU. Now, if you were trying to fade something, generally speaking, you don't want to fade the thing with news because the thing with news has a reason to go up. Stuff without news doesn't have a reason to keep going, on average, right? the SMCI news was guidance raise, so it's very positive, and you know, it's that's the news driving the market. So even though we have CBRS, NBIS, SMCI as potential fade candidates, the best fade candidate here is probably CBRS and also probably NBIS, because these things don't have news directly with respect to the stock. Something like SMCI, like I know it has a gap and all that, but it had a reason to go up. It wasn't up 3 days in a row. You know, if you look at CBRS, the other thing like playing into my position, my trades was this is day 1, it's technically higher. This is day 2, and now we're day 3, and it looks like this. So there's no news driving the move. It's up 3 days in a row, and today it's up from $200 to $250. Essentially, it's up a lot on the day. This was a 20% move. So at this point, you get some sort of capitulation on the breadth, and then it fades. And I think this is the short. And again, this wasn't my exact process at the time. I went with NBIS because NBIS faded immediately as well. And then we also had AMD fading. And I thought, the same thing I thought for everything else. I was like, AMD is up 1, 2, 3. This is day 4. And I hadn't seen CBRS at the time. So I faded, instead of AMD, I went with Soxel. I faded Soxel right here off the close. So that's what I did. The Soxel stopped me out pretty quick right there. And then ultimately, because the news was so strong, I re-entered short right here, I think. Because 3 red candles, there was a lot of breadth at the time. And I was like, you know what? If there was ever a day to fade things midday, I think today could be it. So I took a bit of a revenge trade. I normally won't do that. I'll probably never, my goal is to never do it again. That never stopped me out, and I was able to exit when it puked towards the close. I closed my position 1 minute before the close or something. Yeah, I closed it right here. So I don't think that was a good trade, but NBIS, on the other hand, was a very good trade. I closed it here as well. So my entry was here. It never stopped me out because I put my stop right, like basically right up here. And then I luckily got out. But the main thing today was to learn. So the best trades of the day were the SMCIs. That's where the market was the most active. And taking that orb long would have worked really well, and you definitely could have done it. And then also, I think the fade on, I did NBIS, but CBRS was pretty valid as well, and that one just worked perfectly. So if you held it until the end of the day, which you should have given the situational awareness, CBRS did 10%, and then CBRZ did 30, oh my God, 33%. So, just coming up with these rules, hopefully I explained it. Basically, you expect the market to be choppy, no swings are going to work. Then you take a breakout in whatever had news, like 8 headlines on SMCI. But because the market's choppy, you wait until either, at this point, almost all names were green over the last 5 minutes and very green over the last half hour. It makes sense to start taking profits. And then because you think the market's choppy, you fade things. And CBRZ would have been the absolute best name to fade. So given the situational awareness, you hold the orb for a short period of time, you hold the fade for a long period of time. That would have been the best way to approach the day. So that's the video, and that's my review and my plan for next time. I'm literally going to do this exact process tomorrow. So thanks for watching. Bye.